Most people don't lose their happiness all at once. They lose it one small thought at a time. Ethan Carter had what many would call a simple, good life. He lived in a small but cozy house on a quiet street just outside the city, about 20 minutes from his job. Every morning, he woke up at 7 a.m., made himself a cup of coffee, and sat by the window watching the sunlight slowly fill the room. There was something peaceful about those moments, something steady and calm that made him feel like everything was okay. His job wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. He worked as an assistant manager at a local hardware store, where he knew most of the regular customers by name. They trusted him, and he liked that. It made him feel useful. Every evening, he came home, cooked a simple dinner, and spent time talking with his wife, Emma. They didn't have much, but they had enough. At least, that's what Ethan believed. On weekends, they would take long walks in the park, sometimes stopping for ice cream or sitting quietly on a bench, watching people pass by. There was no rush, no pressure, just small moments that made life feel full in a quiet way. Ethan often told himself, "I may not be rich, but I'm content." And for a long time, that was true. He didn't compare himself to others. He didn't chase big dreams or expensive things. He simply lived, one day at a time, appreciating what he had. But deep inside, in a place he rarely paid attention to, there was a small question waiting. A quiet whisper that hadn't yet grown loud enough to disturb his peace. One evening, after finishing dinner, Ethan stepped outside to take out the trash. The air was cool, and the street was unusually quiet. As he walked back toward his front door, he noticed something sitting near the edge of the sidewalk. It was a small, worn-out cloth bag, tied loosely at the top. He paused for a moment, looking around, but there was no one nearby. Curious, he picked it up. It felt heavier than it looked. His heart beat just a little faster as he untied the string and opened the bag. Inside, there were coins. Dozens of them. Shiny, neatly stacked coins that caught the light from the street lamp. Ethan's eyes widened. He quickly stepped inside, closed the door, and placed the bag on the table. For a second, he just stared at it, almost as if it might disappear. Then, slowly, he began to count. 1, 2, 10, 20. His voice was soft, almost careful, as if he didn't want to break the moment. When he finally reached the end, he stopped. His fingers froze over the last coin. 99. Ethan frowned slightly. He counted again, just to be sure. 1, 2, 10, 20, 99. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the coins. 99. Not 100. Not complete. Something about that number didn't feel right. And without realizing it, for the very first time, a new thought quietly entered his mind. Why is it not 100? He should have felt lucky, but something about that number kept pulling at his mind. Ethan sat there for a long time, staring at the coins spread across the table. 99. It was so close to 100 that it almost felt intentional, as if someone had stopped just one step before finishing. He tried to shake it off and smiled to himself. "This is already more than I ever expected," he said quietly, gathering the coins back into the bag. But the thought did not leave. That night, as he lay in bed, Emma softly asleep beside him, Ethan stared at the ceiling. His mind replayed the number again and again. 99. If it were 100, it would be perfect, he whispered under his breath. He turned to his side, trying to sleep, but his thoughts would not slow down. By morning, the calm routine he once enjoyed felt slightly different. As he drank his coffee by the window, his eyes drifted away from the sunrise and back toward the bag sitting on the kitchen table. It was still there, quiet and unchanged, yet it seemed to carry a weight far beyond coins. At work, Ethan tried to focus on his tasks. He greeted customers, organized shelves, and handled small problems like he always did. But his mind kept wandering. While helping a customer choose tools, he suddenly found himself calculating how much money one more coin might represent. It was not about the value anymore. It was about completion. Something inside him began to shift. Later that afternoon, during his break, Ethan sat alone and pulled out a small notebook. He began writing numbers, trying to estimate how long it would take to earn just a little more money. If I work a few extra hours each week, maybe pick up a second job, I could make up for it, he thought. The idea seemed simple at first, reasonable, even responsible. When he returned home that evening, Emma greeted him with a warm smile. "How was your day?" she asked. Ethan hesitated for a moment, then said, "Good." Just thinking about picking up some extra shifts. You know, saving more for the future. Emma nodded gently. We are already doing okay, she replied. But Ethan did not fully hear her. His mind was somewhere else, chasing a number that had started to feel more important than it should. That night, after dinner, he took the coins out again. Slowly, carefully, he counted them one more time. 99. He held the last coin between his fingers, turning it under the light. Just one more, he said quietly. And in that moment, something invisible but powerful took root inside him. What once felt like enough no longer did. And for the first time, Ethan stopped appreciating what he had and started focusing on what was missing. The next morning, Ethan woke up earlier than usual, but not because he felt rested. His mind had been working all night, repeating the same quiet thought over and over again. Just one more. He sat at the edge of his bed, looking down at his hands, feeling a strange mix of urgency and determination. It was no longer just an idea. It felt like something he needed to fix. As he got ready for work, everything felt slightly different. The same mirror, the same kitchen, the same cup of coffee, but his attention was no longer in the present moment. His eyes kept drifting back to the bag of coins sitting on the table, as if it was calling him. At work, Ethan began to change in small ways that no one noticed at first. He started volunteering for extra shifts, offering to stay late, and even coming in on his days off. His manager appreciated his dedication, and his coworkers admired his effort. You are really stepping up, one of them said. Ethan smiled, but it was not the same relaxed smile he used to have. It was tighter, more focused. Inside, he was not thinking about growth or responsibility. He was thinking about closing the gap. Every extra hour meant progress. Every dollar earned felt like a step closer to something complete. Days turned into weeks, and the rhythm of his life began to shift. He stopped taking evening walks with Emma. When she suggested going to the park, he would gently say, "Maybe another time, I just need to finish something important." Emma noticed the change. One night, as they sat at the dinner table, she looked at him carefully and asked, "Ethan, what are you chasing?" He paused for a moment, surprised by the question. "Nothing," he replied quickly. "I just want us to have a little more security." Emma nodded slowly, but something in her eyes showed concern. "We already have enough," she said softly. But Ethan did not feel that way anymore. The word enough had started to lose its meaning. Late that night, after Emma had gone to sleep, Ethan sat alone at the table again. He poured the coins out and counted them carefully, his fingers moving faster now, more practiced. 99. He placed them back in a neat stack and stared at them. They no longer brought him joy. They felt incomplete, almost frustrating. He opened his notebook and looked at the numbers he had written. His plan had become more detailed. More hours, less spending, more saving. Everything was focused on reaching that missing piece. He leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes for a moment. In the silence, a small voice inside him asked a question he did not want to hear. What happens when you get the 100th coin? Ethan opened his eyes slowly. He did not have an answer. But instead of questioning the chase, he pushed the thought aside. Because now, stopping felt harder than continuing. And without realizing it, Ethan was no longer living his life. He was measuring it. Weeks passed, and the change in Ethan was no longer small. It had become part of who he was. Every morning, he no longer sat quietly with his coffee. Instead, he rushed through his routine, his mind already focused on the day ahead. Time was no longer something to enjoy. It was something to use. Every minute had to count. At the hardware store, his energy seemed impressive from the outside. He moved faster, spoke less, and took on more responsibility than anyone else. His manager began to rely on him heavily, often giving him extra tasks that others avoided. "You are the most dependable person here," his manager said one afternoon. Ethan nodded, but inside, he was not proud. He was calculating. More hours meant more money. More money meant getting closer. But no matter how much he worked, the feeling inside him did not change. It only grew stronger. One evening, Emma waited for him at the dinner table. The food had already gone cold. The clock showed 9:30 p.m. When Ethan finally walked in, he looked tired, but not in a peaceful way. His eyes were restless, as if they were always searching for something. "You missed dinner again," Emma said softly. Ethan sighed and set his bag down. "I had to stay late," he replied. "It is important right now." Emma looked at him for a moment, then asked gently, "More important than us?" Ethan paused. The question felt heavier than he expected. "I am doing this for us," he said, but even as he spoke, his voice lacked certainty. Emma did not argue. She simply nodded and began to clear the table. That silence said more than any words could. Later that night, Ethan sat alone once again. The house was quiet, but his mind was not. He took out the coins and placed them on the table. The familiar sound of metal against wood filled the room. One by one, he counted them again. 99. The number felt louder now, almost mocking him. He clenched his jaw slightly. "I am close," he whispered. "I just need a little more time." But something strange had started to happen. Even as he got closer to his goal, the satisfaction he expected never came. Instead, there was a constant pressure, like a weight that never lifted. He opened his notebook and looked at the pages filled with numbers, plans, and calculations. What had started as a simple idea had now become a system, a routine, a rule he could not escape. The next day, Ethan pushed himself even harder. He skipped lunch to save money. He avoided small pleasures he once enjoyed. Even buying a simple coffee began to feel like a mistake. That money could go toward the goal, he told himself. Slowly, the things that once made his life feel warm and complete began to disappear. The laughter, the quiet evenings, the small joys that required no effort. They were replaced by something colder, something endless. One night, as Ethan stood in front of the mirror, he stopped for a moment. He looked at his reflection, really looked at it, as if seeing himself for the first time in weeks. His face looked older. His eyes looked tired, not from work, but from something deeper, something constant. He leaned closer to the mirror and asked quietly, "When did I start feeling like this?" There was no answer, only silence. And in that silence, the truth was beginning to form, but Ethan was not ready to face it yet. The days no longer felt like days. They felt like steps in a calculation. Ethan woke up earlier, worked longer, and rested less. But no matter how much effort he gave, the feeling inside him did not settle. It only grew louder. Every dollar he earned no longer felt like progress. It felt like proof that he was still missing something. One afternoon, while organizing shelves at the store, he overheard two co-workers laughing about a weekend trip they were planning. For a brief moment, Ethan paused and listened. There was something light in their voices, something he used to recognize. But instead of joining them, he turned away and continued working. "I do not have time for that," he told himself. "I have something more important to finish." But deep down, he could not explain what that something really was. That evening, Emma tried again. She placed 2 cups of coffee on the table and sat across from him. "Do you remember when we used to sit like this every night?" she asked gently. Ethan looked up, confused for a second, as if the memory had faded. "We still can," he replied, but his voice sounded distant. Emma shook her head slightly. "You are here, but you are not really here anymore." Ethan felt a small discomfort in his chest, but he pushed it aside. "This is temporary," he said. "Once I reach my goal, everything will go back to normal." Emma looked at him carefully. "And what is your goal?" she asked. Ethan opened his mouth to answer, but no clear words came out. He hesitated, then said quietly, "Just a little more." The answer hung in the air, vague and unfinished. That night, as usual, Ethan sat alone with the coins. He poured them onto the table and counted them again, slower this time, almost as if he was searching for something different. 99. He leaned back and stared at them. For the first time, the number did not just feel incomplete. It felt endless, because no matter how many times he counted, it never changed. And no matter how much he worked, the feeling inside him stayed the same. He picked up one coin and held it tightly in his hand. "Why is this not enough?" he asked quietly. The question lingered, heavier than before. He thought about the life he had just a few weeks ago. The calm mornings, the quiet dinners, the simple walks. None of those things required more. None of them needed to be completed. They were already whole. But now, everything felt measured. Everything felt compared. And everything felt just slightly lacking. The next morning, Ethan pushed himself even further. He skipped breakfast, rushed to work, and took on even more hours than before. His body felt tired, but his mind refused to slow down. It kept repeating the same idea over and over again. "You are close. Do not stop now." But the closer he tried to get, the further peace seemed to move away. And without realizing it, Ethan was no longer chasing a missing coin. He was chasing a feeling that could not be completed. The more Ethan tried to move forward, the more something inside him began to fall apart. It did not happen all at once. It happened quietly, in small moments he barely noticed at first. One morning, as he rushed out the door, Emma called his name. "Ethan, you forgot your lunch." He stopped for a second, looked at the bag in her hand, and then shook his head. "It is fine. I will just skip it." Emma hesitated. "You have been skipping meals a lot lately." Ethan forced a quick smile. "I am just trying to stay focused." But as he walked away, there was no sense of discipline in his steps, only pressure. At work, his body kept moving, but his mind felt heavier than ever. He made small mistakes, things he would never have done before. He miscounted inventory. He forgot simple requests. His manager noticed. "Are you okay?" he asked one afternoon. Ethan nodded quickly. "Just a little tired." But tired was not the right word. It was something deeper, something constant. Later that evening, Ethan returned home later than usual. The house was quiet. The lights were dim. Emma was sitting by the window, looking outside. She did not turn when he walked in. "You missed dinner again," she said softly. Ethan sighed and dropped his bag. "I told you, I have to do this right now." Emma finally looked at him. Her eyes were calm, but there was a sadness in them he could not ignore. "Do what?" she asked. "Chase something you cannot even explain?" Ethan felt a sudden tension rise inside him. "I am trying to make things better," he said, his voice sharper than before. Emma shook her head slowly. Things were already good. The words stayed in the air, quiet but heavy. Ethan did not respond. He walked past her and sat at the table. His hands moved automatically as he reached for the coins again. He poured them out, the familiar sound filling the silence between them. One by one, he counted. 99. His jaw tightened. It felt like the number was mocking him now. Emma watched from a distance. "You have counted them every night," she said gently. "What are you hoping will change?" Ethan did not look up. "I just need one more," he whispered. Emma stood up slowly and walked closer. "And then what?" she asked. Ethan paused. His fingers stopped moving. The question echoed in his mind. "And then what?" He opened his mouth, but no answer came. Instead, there was only silence. A long, uncomfortable silence that made something inside him shift. For the first time, he felt a crack in his certainty. That night, Ethan could not sleep at all. He sat in the dark, staring at the coins on the table. The room felt different now. Not peaceful, not calm. It felt heavy, as if something invisible was pressing down on him. He leaned forward, resting his head in his hands. "Why does this feel so important?" he asked quietly. No one answered. But deep inside, something was beginning to rise. Not clarity, not peace, but a growing awareness that whatever he was chasing was no longer giving him anything in return. And yet, he still could not stop. The next day, something inside Ethan felt different, but not in a way he could explain. It was not relief, and it was not clarity. It was a quiet heaviness that followed him everywhere he went. As he walked into work, the store looked the same as always, but for the first time, he did not feel connected to it. The shelves, the customers, the routine conversations, all of it felt distant, like he was watching someone else live his life. Throughout the day, he tried to focus, but his mind kept drifting back to the same question Emma had asked. And then what? The words echoed again and again, louder than before. Every time he tried to ignore it, it came back stronger. That evening, after another long shift, Ethan did not go straight home. Instead, he walked slowly through the quiet streets, his hands in his pockets, his steps slower than usual. The air was cool, and the city noise had faded into the distance. For the first time in weeks, he was not rushing. He was not calculating. He was just walking. And in that stillness, something began to surface. He stopped near a small park where he and Emma used to sit together. The bench was empty. The trees moved gently in the wind, and the streetlights cast soft shadows on the ground. Ethan stood there for a moment, then sat down slowly. He looked around, taking in the quiet, the simplicity, the calm he once knew so well. It felt familiar, but also strangely far away. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, and let out a long breath. "When did I lose this?" he whispered. His mind began to replay the past few weeks, not as numbers or plans, but as moments. The missed dinners, the quiet conversations that never happened, the smiles he did not return, the peace he once had without effort. And then, like a sudden shift, he saw it clearly. It had all started with a single thought. Just one more. He sat there in silence, letting that realization settle. It was not the coins. It was never about the coins. It was the feeling that something was missing, even when nothing truly was. He closed his eyes for a moment, and for the first time, he allowed himself to feel the weight of it. Not the pressure to fix it, not the urge to chase something else, but the simple truth of what had happened. When he opened his eyes again, something had changed. Not completely, not suddenly, but enough to make him pause. Enough to make him question the path he had been following so blindly. Slowly, he stood up and began walking home. His steps were still heavy, but they were no longer rushed. And as he reached his front door, his hand resting on the handle, one quiet thought rose in his mind, different from all the others that had come before. What if I was already enough before I started counting? When Ethan stepped inside the house, everything was quiet. The lights were dim, and the air felt still, almost as if the space itself had been waiting. Emma was sitting at the table, her hands wrapped around a cup that had long gone cold. She looked up as he entered, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. Ethan slowly walked in and sat across from her, the same place he used to sit every night before everything began to change. There was no rush in his movements now, no urgency in his eyes. Just a quiet weight, and something new beneath it. He looked at Emma, really looked at her, as if noticing something he had been missing for a long time. "I think I understand now," he said softly. Emma did not respond right away. She simply listened. Ethan took a slow breath, his eyes lowering for a moment before returning to hers. "It was never about the money," he continued. "It was about the feeling that something was missing. And I believe that if I just added one more thing, everything would feel complete." He paused, letting the words settle. But it never did. Emma nodded slightly, her expression calm but attentive. "Because it cannot," she said gently. Ethan leaned back in his chair, the tension in his shoulders slowly easing. "I kept thinking that I was getting closer," he said. "But the closer I got, the more I felt like I needed even more. It never stopped." His voice was quiet, but steady. Emma looked at him with a soft understanding. "That is how it works," she replied. "When you focus on what is missing, you will always find something missing." The room fell into a peaceful silence. Not the heavy silence from before, but something lighter, something clearer. Ethan reached into his bag and slowly placed the coins on the table. He did not rush. He did not count them right away. He simply looked at them. For the first time in a long while, they did not feel like a problem to solve. They were just coins. He began to count them, one by one, his voice calm and steady. 99. He stopped there, his hand resting gently on the last coin. He did not feel the same tension as before. He did not feel the urge to fix anything. Instead, he felt something unfamiliar. A quiet acceptance. Emma watched him closely. "What do you see now?" she asked softly. Ethan looked at the coins, then slowly smiled. It was not a wide smile, but it was real. "I see that I already had more than enough," he said. Emma's eyes softened. "And the missing coin?" she asked. Ethan picked up one coin and held it lightly between his fingers. He looked at it for a moment, then set it back down. "It was never missing," he said quietly. "I was." Just then, there was a gentle knock at the door. Ethan and Emma both looked toward it. The sound was soft, but clear, as if it had been timed perfectly. Ethan stood up slowly and walked toward the door, his heart beating just a little faster, not with anxiety, but with curiosity. As he reached for the handle, a strange sense of familiarity passed through him. He opened the door, and standing there was an old man with calm eyes and a gentle expression. The same man who had given him the bag of coins. The man looked at Ethan and smiled slightly. "So," he said, his voice steady and warm, "have you found the one coin you were looking for?" The old man stepped inside slowly, his presence calm and steady, as if he already knew everything that had happened. Ethan closed the door behind him, his eyes fixed on the man who had unknowingly changed his life. For a moment, no one spoke. The room felt quiet, but not heavy. It felt clear. The old man looked at the coins on the table, then back at Ethan. "Tell me," he said gently, "what did you learn?" Ethan took a slow breath and glanced at the coins. They no longer pulled at him the way they once did. "I thought I needed one more to feel complete," he said. "But the more I chased it, the more I lost everything that already made my life whole." The old man nodded slightly, as if he had heard these words many times before. "That is the nature of the 99, he said. "It is not about what you have. It is about what you think you are missing." Ethan listened carefully, his mind calm for the first time in weeks. The old man continued. Most people are given 99 in life. Not coins, but moments, relationships, peace, and enough to live well. But the moment they start counting, they stop seeing what is already there. Ethan looked down at his hands, remembering the nights he spent counting, the days he spent chasing, and the quiet life he had slowly pushed away. I stopped being grateful, he said quietly. The old man smiled gently. Gratitude does not come from having everything, he replied. It comes from seeing that what you have is already enough. Emma stood quietly beside them, listening, her expression soft and understanding. Ethan looked at her, really looked at her, and in that moment, he saw everything he had almost lost. Not because it disappeared, but because he stopped noticing it. He turned back to the table and slowly gathered the coins into his hands. They felt lighter now, not because they had changed, but because he had. He walked over to the old man and held out the bag. I do not need these anymore, he said. The old man did not take it right away. Instead, he asked, Are you sure? Ethan nodded, his voice steady. Yes, because I finally understand. It was never about the last coin. It was about the way I was looking at my life. The old man smiled, a quiet approval in his eyes. He gently pushed Ethan's hand back. Then keep them, he said. Not as something to complete, but as something to remind you. Ethan looked at the coins again, and for the first time, they felt like a lesson, not a problem. A symbol, not a goal. He nodded slowly. I will remember, he said. The old man turned toward the door, his presence as calm as when he arrived. Before leaving, he paused and looked back at Ethan one last time. Do not count what you lack, he said softly. Count what you have. And with that, he stepped out into the night. The door closed gently behind him, leaving Ethan and Emma standing in a quiet room that no longer felt empty. Ethan placed the coins back on the table, not to count them, but simply to see them. 99. And this time, he smiled, because for the first time, he no longer felt like anything was missing.